welcome Superintendent of Schools and staff here tonight to be presenting on behalf of the Weare School District and John Stark Regional. And we'll start right off so we don't hold them up and do our housekeeping at the end of the meeting. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Is this on? So you have your binders, and it has both budgets in a number of different ways. I tend to like to go by the object budget, and so I thought we'd start with the object summary, and if we'll start with Weare, if that works for you. And also, I printed you off my notes. I thought that might be helpful. You will need your reading glasses.
Always need them now.
I didn't need them last year, now I do.
Oh, she's handing out.
We'll return it.
I think it's a,
So she's handing out.
all right, so for the Weare School District, our current budget is 17.8. And what we're proposing is 18,339,667. The default calculation is 18,285,231. So the overall increase, if we go with our default calculation, is 435,963. And with our proposed, it's 490,399. The proposed budget is a 2.75% increase, and there's $54,436 between the default and the proposed. So that, that's overall. The big news in this budget is special education costs in the Weare School District. And so if you look, we'll go through the salary line, and feel free, Chris, to chime in. My notes, I've taken the object summary for the default and the object summary for the proposed and lined them up, because what often interests the Finance Committee is the difference between the two. And we can also talk about the increase in the two lines in the object. So under salaries, the default is a $21,000 increase, and the proposed is a $57,800 increase. That actually, if you remember, a 2-year teacher's contract was passed last year, so on the warrant, there was projected a $322,000 increase for this year. That is managed in this. We are coming forward with 2 cuts for teachers. This also includes wage increases for those who are not part of the collective bargaining agreements. We have a collective bargaining agreement for our teachers, a collective bargaining agreement for our paraeducators. All other support staff, custodians, office staff, administrators are not part of the collective bargaining unit, and the wage pool is where their increases come from. Also in here, salaries, Centerwood specifically, their sublines. We have historically overspent those sublines, so we are proposing an increase to those lines. Benefits, that line goes down in both budgets, in both the default and the proposed. Our guaranteed maximum health insurance premium increase is 5.2%. In addition to that, So that would be an increase. It's less of an increase than we've seen in the last few years, but it would be an increase. We have census changes. People come and the person who was there before took a family plan, maybe they're taking a two-person plan, or they're on their parents' health insurance, and so it's census changes, plus by cutting two positions, that also takes all of their benefits out of the budget. So the same reasons for the decrease for dental. The retirement contribution actually decreased the school's required contribution to the state retirement system. So then going to purchase services. Included in purchase services are the SAU, so funding for districts pay in to support the SAU. There was a $60,000 increase to the SAU budget this year. Ware's share this year is of an increase, not share, increase, is $468. That calculation, we could have not gone up at all, but because of your equalized value, enrollment, that number shifts even if the number doesn't go up. I think last year this number was higher here, and at John Stark it was lower. We're doing the opposite this year. There are some significant special education increases that we can go through. Our administrators, there's an increase of $4,600 so that they can take courses. We have a couple administrators who are getting their certification, and we want to support some of their coursework. We have less federal grant money within professional development, and so we're looking to build up that line. A couple of changes. You're going to see big increases and decreases within the purchase service line. One of the And we move them to different places in the budget. So Chris is trying to, from an accounting perspective, kind of clean up where things are, have the budget be more clear. And so one thing, we have a facilities manager who is .2, so 1 day a week at Center Woods, shared with John Stark. And then we have a facilities manager at Weare Middle School who's 50% at Weare Middle, 50% at Henniker. We contract out with those two places. So Weare does not employ the two folks. We contract out. Chris moved them to the 500s instead of the 300s because that...
The 500 line, it designates that, so we're a local education authority, it designates, the line that I moved it to designates it that that amount shows up in two different LEAs so that the state can not count it twice on their state report. So it should have been there, and I just was making that correction.
The same with the athletic line. There's a $4,500 that should be in the 300s. So there's an addition there under athletics. It was in athletic supports. It belongs under purchase services.
And that one was to match what we were already doing in John Stark.
And then we have an increase for our auditors. Under property services, there's a water and sewer decrease and disposal decrease. I think those were generally at Weare Middle School. Also a decrease in contracted cleaning. I'm hoping to have employees for that. And our repair and maintenance have increased. We're looking to have a plan for repair and maintenance for our systems, and that helps us to get on a regular schedule. Under purchase services, our transportation goes there. There is an increase to the transportation contract. That actually is offset significantly at Centerwoods because of, we no longer do that kindergarten run. That was a $70,000 decrease in the transportation line, so it offset the natural increase for the transportation contract. There's an increase, the facilities folks go in this line, and our internet costs increased.
I
Then,
apologize, I just realized earlier when we were talking about where those moved, I said 500s, that was meant to mean other purchase services. I apologize about that. That might not have been clear to everybody.
both buildings, Jess, Principal Potter and Principal Barry have done some work within the supply lines. And they went through and previously, and so I'll phrase it differently. In our proposed budget, we are, rather than having English supplies and English equipment and English repairs and English software, anything that really we might have had $300 here, $1,500 here. We're combining those into supplies. Really, they're supplies. What we're buying within them are supplies. So it makes much more sense for most discipline areas to have that go into the supply line.
Yeah.
So,
And in a lot of those other cases, the like in repair and maintenance, the need is an unexpected need as opposed to a planned need. So when we have an unexpected need, I'd much rather move it out of supplies than have it sit in repair and maintenance all year if nothing does come up. So just having that being where we need it first and then making choices as we go along.
so if you look to the 700s and 800s, there are property and other, there are costs we shifted from the 700s and 800s to the 600s, which is the supply. So even with those shifts, we were able to cut the supply lines. So across the board, and I do want to commend the work done at the buildings. They looked at past usage and really tried to hone in on what we need. So those are the big changes. We can get into nitty-gritty, but I thought an overview might be useful. Did I forget anything?
I don't think so. I would say, just speaking a little bit to the repair and maintenance increase, specifically, that's partially we're stepping up the need post-COVID for additional, you know what, actually, sorry, that's equipment. So actually, that number would be predominantly, there's a large need in facilities in, as Weare Middle School ages and gets more into it's no longer the new building anymore. We're getting into the 15-year range. We're finding HVAC costs to be costly, and we need to have money to respond to those items.
We've had some unexpected costs come up this year.
And last.
And last year.
Yeah.
And that's all just based on just older facility?
Yeah,
It's all related to that?
the years on the ERVs and the technology that's on our roof, as they get closer to 25 years, they start to get worn out. We have to change large mechanisms within the unit so that we can keep it going. We need to make sure that we're maintaining those so we can get hopefully more than the stated useful life out of it as opposed to less, because those are quite costly and we'd rather not have to do a project like that.
I think for a long time, Weare Middle School was the new school, but it's almost, the bond is almost expired, and we just have to be thinking about preventative maintenance and keeping things in good order.
Questions?
Yeah, I got a couple, good.
When I look at the default budget,
Yes.
under purchase services and other purchase services, this year you had, we've talked about this, but just so everybody
Yes.
can have a better understanding. You had positions you couldn't fill, support positions, and you had a contract for those, and the cost went up for those. And in last year's budget, you weren't budgeted that way, so you had to borrow from maybe the salary budget, because you weren't paying salary, so you put it in here. Now, when you create your default budget for this next year, it looks like those services have been carried forward in the default budget. Perhaps. I'm only looking at,
I believe the para expenses specifically, I believe, still are in the para lines.
Yep.
And we hope that hiring goes better next year, and
Yeah.
again, we'd have to pivot if that doesn't come true.
well,
So-
my question is, if I'm looking at just a default object summary, 2020, the 22 to 23 budget is 1.291 million for purchase services. The 23-24 default is 1.904. How do we go from 1.2 to 1.9 in a default budget? Where
So
does $700,000 come from?
the default budget is made up of anything that we're legally obligated. So it's last year, it's last year's number, plus or minus one-time expenses. So, and then in addition to things that were legally obligated. When I said the story of this budget was special education, the story of this budget is special education. And we go through a process with students. We have increased significant needs for students and have a legal obligation to meet those needs. A lot of those fall within contracted service. Either we have PT come in, we have, and the big one is speech language. We actually subtracted salary for 2 positions out of the salary line, so that's part of the cut that's in the salary line, and added contract service. You can't hire a speech language pathologist. We are obligated to provide those speech language pathology services to students. So it is more costly. It's about $50,000 more, $25,000 per position to do contracted service for speech. And we made a conscious decision in that one case to move it from salary in both the default and the proposed, and feel on pretty sure footing in that we're legally obligated to provide those services, and so we need to budget for them. The other, we have other, also in there, under contracted services tuition, out-of-district placement, and we are anticipating an out-of-district placement, and so that goes, that's the big cost.
You get Medicaid reimbursement for services such as PT or OT?
It's less than it used to be, and we try real hard to get those numbers up. The rules and regulations around it changed around the same time as COVID was happening. I don't think it was related, but that was just the time period that I'm pointing to. And so our estimate of what we were going to get for Medicaid has had to tear down over the last few years because it doesn't come in as frequent as it used to.
As part of our monthly reconciliation, you can see our Medicaid projections, and they have gone down, but we do the requests.
Tom?
So, in purchase services, this is where the big jump is, special ed, right?
Yes.
That's about 2/3 of that is special ed. Can you just, like, you can't talk a lot of detail, but can you just explain at a high level why special ed? I mean, you mentioned that there's more students that are being flagged for services, right?
Yes.
Can you just give a little background on that and why that cost is going up so much?
We have, the speech language is one. The screening bar for who we're required to give services to statewide is a lower threshold. So that's one area. We are seeing more significant medical needs, like real medical needing nursing support, nursing contract feeding tubes, and significant physical health needs. More vision and audiology, hearing across, and these are statewide trends. These aren't just Weare. We've had more students move in with individualized education plans, but we also, the students who've been here are being identified and, through a team process, through evaluations. We do not currently have a student in out-of-district placement. We've been pretty successful in trying to meet the needs of students in-house. That can't always happen. And we are also seeing increased behavior and mental health needs, and are trying to navigate that.
So the speech language, the bar got lowered, was that by the state standards? In audiology and vision, is it the same thing? Is the bar lowering there, or is it just an increase in students that happen to be?
Just an increase,
So
I
the bar was
believe.
just the speech side of it?
Yes.
Okay.
In the bar, I mean, the screening,
The screening
it's more
level.
sensitive.
Yeah, I used the word bar.
No, I
generic,
think I
sorry.
did too.
Yeah, but it's just that one. Is any of this related to COVID and the time that we've had off? Is this something that we would continue to see year after year at this level? Or do you think if it's COVID related, would it potentially drop off? I mean, any insight on that?
I don't know. We weren't out of school. And so, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, I didn't, I mean, you don't have to speculate. I
Yeah.
didn't know if anybody had actually thought that way or,
Yeah.
presented that or not. Just curious.
I am sure it is. I mean, there are needs across the United States, across the state,
Yeah.
and increased needs. There was something on the radio just yesterday about special education costs going up statewide.
Yeah, it's just interesting that all of a sudden there's
Yes.
a 50% increase or roughly of special ed, and we just went through a pandemic and,
Yes.
of special ed needs, and I'm just curious if it's a bubble or not.
Right, and we have one more year of the ESSER grant. We have, particularly for some of our behavioral, it's called ABA services. Some of that is in our budget and has been, but we are supplementing those needs, hoping to alleviate them and get them in place so we aren't coming back to you next year with that in the budget. So we are using grant funding for some of those things.
And of course, if it is a bubble, the default works both ways. If it ends up being that we don't have that need anymore,
Yeah.
that would go down.
For one time.
With the
if
needs.
Things change dramatically, yeah. Okay, yeah, I just was curious about that. That's the big one, obviously.
Yeah.
And, it is hard with special education costs predicting 18 months out, what the needs could be, or, and because people move in and out, but this was our best guess at this time, given the students we have.
Okay. Thank you.
Elizabeth, James, anything?
Nobody else?
Any
Well,
questions?
I'm sorry. Nobody else has
Repeat
one.
it.
Yeah, I got another one. Probably got two more.
That's okay.
Okay.
Take three.
No, no, I don't want to dominate the conversation. Is there money in the proposed budget where you had a contract for the para support and that this year? Have you built contract costs into your proposed budget this year? You have not?
No.
Okay, so that was my concern. I hadn't talked last night with you about that because I had a concern that if you had contract costs in there, that if the contract got approved, then
Yep.
would the proposed budget subsequently be reduced by the warrant being.
We had thought that through when we were working with Wes to do negotiations on how to, but that would end up proving too difficult to determine, because then if the contract didn't pass, the
Well, if you had
negation of, you know.
if, I didn't know if you had it, but if you had in your proposed budget money for contracting for paras going into the next year,
Right,
that if your article passed for the support, then subsequently, somewhere in either the proposed budget wording in the warrant or in the
Right.
other one, it would be, if this passes, the proposed budget would be reduced by
right.
We,
the part that you would be contracting out. Otherwise, you would get this and that, and you would,
right.
Yeah,
you would have two
Right.
presents for,
Where we are at this point is
same
we're,
thing.
we're hopeful the contract passes and we can get the 10 positions that we have open in paraprofessionals filled, and, you know, the school can work better because of that. And if that does not happen, we will continue to make it work and use
Yeah.
those 10 positions to fund the ones that are,
The only one we took from salary and moved is speech.
yeah,
The two speech
for
positions.
special education.
Yes.
okay,
The only one showing up in the default with that
Okay.
change.
okay. And the last one, the two positions that you are saying you're gonna cut are middle school positions, right?
They are. There's a two teacher decrease from last year at
Right.
Centerwoods, because we shifted.
Oh, okay, so are we saying the two decrease because fourth and fifth moved over there, is it? No.
So over the summer, we had a position move up to the middle school, and for needs there, and now we're cutting. So it's kind of like we're cutting one from each school since the last time we spoke about this last year.
Where I'm going with the question is my old adage of student population versus number of classrooms versus number of students in a classroom. And going back to 2017-18, we had 1,006 students enrolled in, well, including preschool up through 8th grade. I don't have the number of classrooms for this year. I do have the student totals that we're in currently. But in 21-22, it dropped to 890, or about 899 or so now. A month ago, anyway, it was 899. So the average class size back in 17-18 was about 22 students per class, is from Department of Education. Last year, it dropped to, I think I've got 17.6 in grades 1 through 5. But yet, the positions that are being taken away, there's no thought at some point to cutting a classroom and expanding the number of kids in a classroom up to the low 20s like we had back in 21-22, because a classroom is probably $100,000 if you take a teacher's salary and benefits and a assistant and a function. So if at the elementary school you're able to cut, if you have 4 grades there, or 3 grades, or 4 grades, depending where they're at, but 1 through 5, you cut a couple classrooms, you're talking really 3 classes, the equivalent of a plow truck for the town.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I just want to encourage you to look at class sizes, declining population, although it has stabilized now.
Yep.
And if it's stabilized, maybe this is the sweet spot of where we're at. Maybe we can consider something like that as we move forward. So,
You know, and it is a hard thing to keep that a constant, because they don't decrease by whole class cohorts at each grade level. So if we had, let's see, 100 kids per grade level, we
Yeah.
divide it by 5
Yeah.
and call it 20, and things would be beautiful. Classes of 20 is a very nice size. We currently, our second grade has 4 teachers. And so the third grade next year will have 4 teachers. So we do manage that. We don't want to go over, especially at Centerwoods. We do prioritize. If I want the younger grades to, if we're going to err on the side of smaller classes. 24, 25, 26 is not, I don't think that's what we want.
No, I understand that. And I can just take last year as an example. I mean, and of course, first grade last year was now second grade this year, so that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
And like last year, I had it as 78 kids in 5 classes, 15.6 it averages out to. And if you had reduced the class last year, it was before, but it would still only be 19.5.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not, you were still under 20. And so, I mean, I think, I just encourage that in the
Yes.
future to look at reducing costs. And I also accept what you say on smaller classes, potentially better outcomes, because in the end, when we're looking at student performance, the only way to measure it is standardized testing, I guess, and our test results are not good. So the model isn't working, is what I'm saying, so. Now I'll move on.
Have you found any correlations between students that have been perhaps homeschooled or through the pandemic and then now are in the system and their need for special education?
No. I mean, that's not something I've looked at, but no. We didn't have an exodus of students from our schools, and we haven't had an influx, so I'm not sure we have a group to look at.
And my next question is, when it comes to the 10 open positions for paras, are there particular certifications that could be filtered through to help offset some of the costs for special education?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So are there, and I don't know what the criteria, right, is
Right.
for hiring for these roles, but are there perhaps higher salaries that can be offered based on additional credentialing that the para comes in that could help offset the contracted services for special ed to say, okay, we have a para who's coming in or another teacher that has X certifications in addition to, but these certifications are based on special education needs that will then reduce the cost under professional services?
So I think maybe now's a good time to talk about the contract, the support staff contract that the board ratified yesterday and WESS ratified last week. So the focus of that was increasing wages. They didn't come requesting that we add retirement. We do not pay retirement for our paraeducators. That is our neighbors do pay retirement. We do not pay health care for our support staff, paraeducators, the people in the contract. That is also, our neighbors do offer health care. So, but the lift to provide health care was too big, and what the agreement was that we were going to focus on wages. There is, so to be a para one, there isn't, you can be a para one, you don't need special qualifications, except for a high school diploma. To be a para two, you either need an associate's degree or do a portfolio or take a test, or a couple different pathways to get that. The para two, we incentivize the pay with that para two certification. We moved from, I think, $11.35 starting for para ones to $14.50. If you are para one, $14.50 is, no matter how many years of experience, it's $14.50. Where the incentives are is the para two. You apply through the state, you get that certification, and that goes from $16 to $23.50 with 10 years of experience. So I mean, that's, I think, kind of what you're asking. And then if you have additional training and we need you in this role as a registered behavior technician, that's another certification, or an LNA. We do have some LNA needs, and so if you have that certification, that's an additional, another, that goes from $19 an hour to $27. So we built that into the contract that is going before the voters.
Great, and I do want to point out the work that your team has done to reduce the margin between the proposed and the default, because I believe that during your working session, it was somewhere between 5% and 6%, and now it's down
Right.
to the 2.3, 2.25.
And also the overall, we didn't, so the work session reflects the first draft of our budgets. And so it was after that that we cut the 2 positions. So that reduced the overall increase. I think we were at 4.75.
Yeah, it was like 4.75.
And so
4,
now
5.
we are under 3. All right.
You want? Are there other details with the para contract that you want to share?
You know, there's some language, but I don't know, not cost implications. Adding, there's actually, there's an orientation day for new paras, so it adds 1 day.
Holiday.
And adding a holiday. So those would have cost implications, but they were smaller.
2-year contract, and what are the costs each year?
First year is a 200, Chris is gonna make sure, before we publish that.
Yeah, I haven't done like the final check.
Okay.
But
I get
it's,
nervous when I haven't done that, but it's around
Estimated to be,
201,000 for the first year, and then 39 the second.
okay.
The grid stays the same for both years, so that's why it's
Oh, it is
front
here.
loaded.
Okay, I missed it. That
no,
was it.
it's in
Okay,
tiny,
I see it now.
11-point font on your page, yes.
I see it.
All right. Other questions
We all
about
set
where?
with Weare School District?
My notes for John Stark are a little bigger. Printed by Amelia. So, again, object, and the object and default summary.
Chris, do you want-
Our current John Stark budget is $14,599,000. The proposed is $14,663,000, with the default calculation of $14,451,000, almost $52,000. So the proposed budget represents a $64,521 increase, or a 0.44. The default calculation is actually a $147,558 dollar decrease. There is a $212,000 difference between the default and the proposed. So if it worked, I'll go through again each of the objects. Salaries, a decrease for both, in both the default and the proposed. We restructured the office staff that cut a position that wasn't a pure cut, because we added some stipend for some summer work for the office staff to pick up part of the duties that we did with the cut. We did cut 2 teaching positions. There is also the same thing with speech. We cut in salary, and we shifted to contract service. So when I said Central Woods contracts with John Stark for the facilities manager, what we were not doing before, but we are now, we weren't budgeting for the entire position in the John Stark budget. We need to add that $17,800 in the John Stark salary line, but that will be offset by revenue from Weare. And so it is an increase, but it is offset by revenue, but we don't do that revenue work until tomorrow.
Yeah, so that's another one of those accounting changes. I felt it was more appropriate to have the appropriations, since we were writing the check to the director out of John Stark, and then having the revenue offset. So you see that come in.
We have a almost $26,000 wage pool, again, for folks who aren't in collective bargaining agreements.
Just speaking to the difference in the number between Weare and John Stark. Weare has their support staff is just paras, and so there's more groups of individuals in Weare coming out of that wage pool than there are in John Stark. Just if anybody were to look at, oh wow, why is the wage pool so much higher in Weare? That's the difference there.
And then we also, we went through a NEASC accreditation. That's how high schools are, we get our accreditation. They did a self-study. There was a lot of cost involved with that. We made a cut to those costs. We added $5,000 of that back into curriculum development. When we were budgeting 2 years ago to increase the cost to do the NEASC study, we cut from the curriculum development line. Because most of the work, we often, especially at the high school level, we have folks do a lot of work throughout the summer on their curriculum, and we pay them for it. And we knew the work that we would be doing as a building was all NEASC. NEASC is pretty all-encompassing, and so we did that shift. We're partially shifting back. So that is salaries. In benefits, again, same story as in Weare. We have 2 position cuts, which represents a cut in healthcare, cut in dental, cut in retirement, and workers' comp. We also, position shifts, census changes, all the things that come with benefits.
2 numbers on retirement there?
Yeah. One is teacher and one is support staff.
Okay.
So we do provide it, retirement, we do contribute to the retirement system in John Stark.
For the support, okay.
And so there's 2 different rates depending on who's certified and who's not.
Okay.
Purchase services, we have the SAU shares where this is a bigger number in John Stark, so it's a $35,000, almost $36,000 increase in John Stark's portion. You also see the speech contracted services there. We made some cuts to the purchase services for assemblies, nurses, and guidance. One of the things, like nurses, when the nurse needs to be out of the building, we have been contracting out with a substitute when we have that need. When there's a student in the building that it requires we have a nurse in the building. And we're just going to take that out of the sub line, rather than have its own line. Refs and officials, we need more in that line. Principal, office PD. This is PD, in-service people, the principal brings in to do work with his staff. And then there was an auditor increase in fees.
Question?
Yes.
Concerning the support staff at John Stark and how it differs from Weare School District. Weare is, you're just talking paraprofessionals. correct? When you're
Yes.
talking, and in John Stark, it's all-inclusive, well, what does all-inclusive mean? Let's,
Yes.
They have a grid that spans a lot of different groups. So they're paras, food service, secretarial staff. Am I missing anything?
Custodians.
Custodians. So that group is much larger than a larger percentage of what we would consider support staff at Stark.
and how does that break down as far as retirement contributions? Does some of them, because they work more hours during the year, they're included in the retirement, whereas if they're workers that work partial year or less hours, they can't be included? Is that it? Or who makes that decision? Is it a local level, or is it a state retirement decision?
I believe once a district, and I don't know the history of Weare not paying retirement for support staff, but John Stark, everyone gets retirement.
Paraprofessionals as well?
Yes.
Yeah, it's either you are part of it or you're not, for each side, certified and not
That's a local
certified.
decision,
Yes.
not a state requirement for hours or anything.
Right.
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 So speaking to what we said earlier about there's the certified and non-certified, so Weare participates in the certified group, but we do not participate in the non-certified. So anybody that would be under that lower rate does not receive that benefit.
So the custodians in Weare are not part of the retirement system, the secretaries are not, administrators are, they're certified, and so.
Okay.
Under property services, we have an increase to snow plowing, increase to PE, science and athletic repairs, and then our nursing repairs, we needed to make sure that we were servicing our AED. I didn't realize how much that cost, but that is something we definitely want in working order. Facilities, in total, it's about a $34,000 increase, and that made up in that is upkeep, repairs, grounds, equipment repairs, roof maintenance, heating repairs, glass repairs. Offsetting that is an overall decrease of $37,000 in our computer and maintenance contracts.
How'd you manage that?
I know.
They were in a great spot going into the pandemic, so they didn't need to do the increase there.
Yeah.
So we might see an increase there in a year or two.
Not to
think
what I'm anticipating. They were able to get what they needed in previous years, and so 2, 3, 4 years maybe we're looking at more needs. But right now this represents funding Chromebooks for the 9th grade annually, and also doing projects as needed, servers and things of that nature. So speaking to what I said earlier, when it comes to equipment, we're looking at asking for things when we need them and specifying like we need a server, and not having like money to respond as specifically to respond to emergency type deals.
But to reiterate, what we're trying to do in Weare is to get to a point where we're level, like we are at Stark, where
With computers.
with computers for our teachers and for our students. And so you don't see the upticks that we've been seeing in Weare. So we went into John Stark with all, students already had access
Yeah.
to Chromebooks.
And-
We had to upgrade some of them, and we used ESSER funds for that.
Right, so last year when we presented the budget, we spoke to wanting to stagger those lines in Weare up. So this past year, we spent $60,000 in ESSER of needs that would have been in the budget, but we did not add to the budget. And now this year, we're increasing the computer lines a step up to fund, again, the grade level replacement of Chromebooks and servers and things of that nature.
Now, do you anticipate a similar consistent pattern when it comes to the software upgrades? 'Cause software apps are becoming far more costly. And so do you anticipate those costs remaining on the lower end, or do you anticipate an increase when it comes to the software?
What we've been doing, and so we've been buying programs, and it's no longer, you don't buy books anymore, you buy a program, and software is included in that. And so there are some consumables, there's a software, often a blended learning environment, so there's some of it's online, some of it's hard copy, there are some books, but it's not as simple as software doesn't sit over here separately. So we actually, that goes into supplies now. And so we did the same thing at Stark we moved all the social studies supplies, which includes things like our software resources, because those are things that are supplies for our classroom. They're no different than the workbooks or the book books that we need for the course. So next year, if the proposed budget goes through, next year you're going to see 1, 2 in maybe art and PE where we need to do repair of equipment and maintenance, but you're going to see consolidated lines for the different discipline areas.
And then also talking to a lot of the things that we were calling software in 2022 were really subscriptions to online media. And so we don't really consider that software. It's not like you don't have a disk anymore. It's you log onto the computer and you have access to a website that provides curriculum material. And so those type of things got moved to supplies.
So we have our other purchase services. John Stark also has increased needs. This is a little different than the Weare story, but we've got transportation increases. We have some significant special education or specialized transportation increases. Those are both in the default and in the proposed. And then there's a list of things that are just in our proposed. We have additional students going to CRTC, and so we actually added, there are 2 sessions of CRTC, and we added another bus run this year, and we want to keep that going. Our athletic transportation costs have gone up, co-curricular, and I'll jump down to the bottom of that group. We also have more students who wanted to go to CRTC. They have some amazing programs. I think it's wonderful. See, I'm sorry, Concord Regional Technical Center. And so we have students doing carpentry and mechanics and early childhood education.
Vocational stuff? Is it vocational?
You know, it runs the gamut. It's not the vocational in, there's culinary, there's a theater, like stage production, but it's that hands-on learning, very,
ready, right?
yep. And so this wasn't a John Stark student, but there was a student who wants to go be an architect. She did the carpentry program. And so you have students across, with all sorts of career goals, taking advantage of these programs.
Is that in addition to the normal curriculum that they're in?
Yes.
So is it after school,
It
evenings?
There are 2 morning sessions,
Okay.
and so a bus goes with one group. Usually, I can't remember which one's the first year and which one's the second year, but there are 2 sessions. They go to Concord. The program is, if you've seen the Concord High School campus, it's around back of the campus. It's pretty slick, what they have available for students. So our students go to that. Kearsarge goes to CRTC, Merrimack Valley, Bow, all the local schools go there.
So there's tuition and transportation costs associated with that?
There is.
Which one of those is co-curricular transportation?
It does say vocational,
Oh,
vocational
that's it.
transportation, so it's about $8,000
that's CRTC.
of and then down tuition CRTC of
Yeah.
$109,000.
Okay, the transportation is the vocational line. that
Yes.
would associate with that?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's another thing we looked to ESSER to accomplish the transportation this year.
Okay.
And just speaking to that CRTC program, that's a program that's highly reimbursed from state funding as well.
Oh, okay.
So that assists in the payment of that tuition.
This is our portion of
This
it.
is our after
Yeah.
that.
And, there are school districts, I know, the school my daughter went to, she did CRTC, and there was talk one year of, because it wasn't in the budget, there was more need or more want by students to go to the program than was in the budget. They were going to cap it, and they were trying to figure out how to do that. And so, that is an option. I think overall, the board's been pretty supportive of,
Yeah, they got it in there, but with a very small increase. They found other ways to
Right.
balance things off.
and then the second start tuition is, we have some students who are doing, it's called HiSET. It's almost like an adult ed program. So it's tuition for some of those. We're investigating how we do some of that at John Stark, but right now we don't have that program. So those are those two increases, and then in between the transportation and the tuition, you have some ups and downs with telephone and data, insurance, actually no downs, all ups. Telephone, data, insurance, and printing.
Data being mostly for your internet connectivity, and telephone would be voice lines as well as maintenance on any telephony equipment you have?
The telephone line it's just service.
That's
Just incoming service.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we've cut it in the other schools, but the high school, the use of telephones has been, that's been decreased in the other districts.
Well, the decrease in the other districts is because
We shifted it.
We shifted it because we previously didn't have a line designated data communications in Weare, and so we were paying it all out of telecommunications, and that didn't feel like we were telling the whole story. So we moved it into data communications. So the telecommunications line itself, the expenses there in Weare are staying the same. It's just we're
Okay.
moving out to better signify.
Question, yeah, it's actually from the past section, I didn't get in quick enough, sorry. Are there a lot of servers in the two schools, physical on-premise servers? You mentioned it a few times, I wasn't sure.
There are servers,
I
we
don't know
are,
if this is a full answer. I don't really. I was in a server room yesterday. Each building has a server room with a fair amount of hardware. But we can get you a more detailed answer on that.
I was just curious, I know some of it's probably for telephone and internet and things like that, but
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know if there were any data and application servers on-premise servicing anything, or if it was all infrastructure servers.
my guess would be primarily infrastructure, because we've moved to hosted solutions for most
Because
of
the whole
our,
world was getting rid of their servers,
Yeah.
so I was just curious if you were going down that path.
we are,
To virtual.
We're exploring the best we can around consolidation and digitalization.
Yeah.
but specifically, like our student information system is hosted. Some of the access to our business, like my access is hosted.
Budgeting.
Yeah,
Yeah, our accounting software is completely hosted.
Okay.
It's just so we have like desktop access as well.
Yeah, all right.
Food service hosted.
and that has been a shift over the last 5 years, I
Yeah,
guess.
Yeah, I mean, it gets rid of a lot of the maintenance and upgrade and repairs.
There's also a data security, I think, recommendation.
Yeah, the cloud is much more secure focused, yeah.
This little side question, I hear ESSER mentioned several times, and could you explain what that is?
Sure. We received, and I don't have that document here, but we received a lot of money from the federal government over to respond to COVID. And it came in 4 batches. Immediately, we had the CARES money, and at John Stark, that was 123,000. And then we got ESSER one, and ESSER one was, what is that number?
Just under 60.
Okay, 60,000. And then we had 220,000 in ESSER two. And where we're at now is we're in the ESSER three money.
And how's that spelled? That's an acronym, right?
ESSER.
It is every,
Or-
I
I knew it at one point.
yes, yes,
I can get it though.
yeah.
Actually, I can't. I don't have
Yeah,
internet.
so it's ES,
ESSER.
ESSER,
okay.
yes.
And are they set up for 3 tranches, or are there more than 3?
I don't believe we're getting any more money. And so we have, we've been allocated all we're going to get. We have to use it by September 2024, so it impacts, our planning in this budget. It won't, when we come to you next year, it won't be part of our planning.
Elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. And that came in, a lot of different bill acts from the federal government, so it came in the stimulus relief packages.
So you wisely put it to use.
Yes, and we're trying to, use it over the year so it impacts many years of our budgets and use it in a way that doesn't, make it so that for the 24-25 budget, we're here saying we need to put all this back over there.
Yeah.
We're trying to do it in a way that
Right.
meets our needs now, like the computer, staggering it up over the time, and just trying our best to plan accordingly.
Another place we used it is implementation fees for a software program, or those upfront initial implementation are pretty hefty. That's where they get you. Same with some curriculum programming. There's a pretty regular yearly fee, but you have to do this upfront cost. We used ESSER funding to do some of those upfront costs, and then we're able to manage a lot of these things within our budget or, with small increases.
Thank you.
And just real quick, the numbers that Jackie gave you were John Stark. The numbers for Weare, the initial amount was 180, just under 185,000. Then the next one was 91. ESSER 2 was 353,000. And then the one that we're currently chipping away at it was just under 793,000.
Wow.
Bill?
Just,
That's big money. Huh?
just as an example, expand on, there's under the current one, the ESSER three, there's 235,000 expended on an effective school solutions contract. What does that entail?
Mental health support. We have a mental health professional in,
For students, for staff, or,
students.
okay, that's for just primarily the impacts of COVID or is it, how,
The mental health needs within the building impact learning within the building.
Okay.
And so helping, we have actually, we have counselors also at John Stark.
okay, so when this money is gone, is that going to be built into your request and your proposed budget following to continue the program?
We're not sure yet.
Okay, that's a healthy chunk of money, though.
It is, right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, I'm just-
so,
I'm just-
That's 2 years, but that's that's not,
Yeah, but
right,
at some
Still healthy amount,
at some
Yeah.
point, like you said, the funding's going to end.
yeah.
And if you want
So-
to continue that, it's going to have to roll into
right. What,
paying for it.
absolutely. And what we had found was it enabled us to bring back some students from out-of-district placement. And so it was actually fairly cost-effective.
Oh, okay, you're talking about the in-house is cheaper than
In-house versus out.
out-of-district, yeah.
And so we'll have to see if we have that need. It was actually in our budget in our budget proposal in 2019.
Okay,
And we did take it out So we wanted it. We did come forward with that, and then COVID happened. We got the grant money the next year.
Yeah.
We used grant money to.
This is supposed to be, it's COVID money, but at some point the pandemic is over, so
Yep.
maybe people get more mentally stable and we move on. I'm just saying, on balance.
Yeah, the decision around the ending of the funding for that program has been something that we've
Yeah.
talked about every time we do a budget or do the ESSER budget.
When it comes to the transportation lines, is this solely to have a driver and the buses available for transportation, or does this also include the fuel? And I see that there's a fuel line below.
So it represents the contract with our, the bus company. And so that's kind of all inclusive, and we get a price per bus run, and we are able to multiply that by the 12 buses that are running and doing that math. So it's all in that, and then in times of increased fuel costs, there is something in the contract that allows them to have a surcharge for that period of time.
I see. And so in terms of, I know we spoke about that there was an electric bus that was awarded. Is that, and of course, there's like no charging stations, so there's a lot of infrastructure issues that are outside of the control of the district. However, where are we at in terms of rolling in alternative sources of transportation to try to reduce some of these other charges?
So we contract our buses. So it is not, we don't manage them ourselves. And so the 4 buses, electric buses, and the charging infrastructure that goes with that is the responsibility of Student Transportation of America. So they applied for it on our behalf. They needed to have a LEA, which is us, and SAU 24, to get the grant. But there are lots of places that contract their buses. And so other places did the same thing. So they're the bus company's responsibility. All of that's the bus company's. We imagine they're not even going to be on the road. Earliest would be fall 2024. That's if everything lines up, and because there is a increase in requests, recs for electric buses. So they may not even be in place in 2024. So next time we negotiate a contract with Student Transportation of America, that will be part of the calculation. At that point, they may have to invest additional funds themselves. We're not on the hook for that to get the infrastructure up to par. I mean, that's why we contract out, so we don't have to deal with all that.
Thank you.
Although I'm sure Chris would like to take on transportation.
We'd have to know a guy.
So I think the supply line, the property line, and others in the John Stark budget, they go together. There is in our proposed budget, which is the shaded middle column, it's you see 11.91% increase, or $59,000. However, when I talked about that we're combining expenses for each of the disciplinary or like departments, you look at the decrease of 41.7 in property lines and almost 50,000 in other. There is still, a significant overall decrease in our supplies.
Now, is there, in looking, and I know just the transportation, because of the increase in commodity prices and those projected to continue to increase, as we know OPEC is where we get our supply when it comes to oil and all the gas and all that fun stuff. I know some schools have had the higher grades, juniors and seniors, get themselves to the technical program without transportation being available for reducing the budget. Is that something that you've thought about for the kids that are driving, that can just drive themselves to Concord 20 minutes north?
Yeah, we have not talked about that. I think that is not something I'd be in support of, but if the board voted that they wanted that, I think it's an equity issue. And we want all students to be able to take advantage of the CRTC program. And so I think having transportation makes that possible for every student.
Yeah, and so, in other words, if it went from reducing the number of buses from, let's say, 12 in rotation to, let's say, 8, then that would reduce the cost of transportation and also fulfill the equity requirements where you would still be transporting the kids that don't have access to a car and fuel and all of these other things. But for the kids that do, it would allow for them to go ahead and drive themselves, maybe take a few friends. And so it seems as though perhaps that would also reduce the budget and still provide equity.
So it wouldn't reduce the 12 buses because the CRTC run happens after the buses do their other runs. Our bus drivers, I can't remember how many miles each bus does. It's like 400 miles a day. So we have them doing multiple runs. And so after they've dropped off the little kids, they come drop off the big kids and they pick up the folks who are going to CRTC. They do a loop to Concord. But that is a run, and that does cost money. So that is not something
Am I right that that's traditionally one bus to Concord, and this year it's 2? Does that
Yes.
sound right?
Yep. There isn't parking in Concord for them. If you've been to, there's been talk of maybe if CRTC moved, that might be a possibility. But I did my student teaching in Concord a while ago, and there wasn't parking then. That situation has not gotten better, so.
Yeah, I think there's also liability for students driving other students.
Yeah.
You'd have to have,
Yep.
Yeah, I would be concerned sending a carload of teenagers on a regular basis.
What could go wrong?
Every morning.
Might get a
I
deer
know
like my
Londonderry
granddaughter
did
did.
it. Londonderry did it.
My daughter did a deer too, but-
Bedford, I think also. And so there are school districts in New Hampshire that have operated like that to, in terms of reducing the budget. And then, of course, the insurance costs are on their parents with the vehicle. And then there's waivers that are signed to allow for the parents to go ahead and buy in or not.
Right.
And choose to transport their child via the bus or not. But the overall outcome in Londonderry, this was like 20 years ago, you know, and things have changed since then, and some programs that are still doing it, that it was reducing the budget significantly. And of course, I mean, accidents are going to happen in general, always. That's why insurance costs usually don't go down until 25. But just an idea and a thought that,
Right.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, when I was a high school coach, I was naive, but I found kids sometimes don't go where they say they're gonna go.
No.
Sometimes they do other things on the way, so.
who knew?
You know, we actually don't have to do transportation for high schoolers at all. So if it was the will of the community, it is not state law for us to transport high schoolers. So, I mean, we could save some runs.
Is that tuition cost, do you have good data on that? Is that what we're actually spending, or is that an anticipation number, or?
For
CRTC
CRTC,
tuition, sorry.
we have very recent data
Yes,
on that.
That was updated based on a report that I received a week or two ago, indicating what they estimate our current student load would be next year.
Okay. So
And-
how long have we been doing that?
The
CRTC?
participating in the program
Yeah,
for
Years
yeah,
and years?
Yeah, years and years.
Okay.
yeah. But there was an uptick in students who wanted to go.
Okay.
And so we are, how much is it offset by the state? Up to 75%?
The 75% is what it's stated, but it's normally actually within 56 to 64% or
So
so.
that's like a $350,000 expense?
Yeah, it's
Before, yeah.
about 6,500 tuition per student.
Okay, well,
Before it comes down
Yeah.
to getting to us at $1,600 a student.
okay. You got one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm gonna set the Wayback Machine 3 years or so. John Stark did the facility boiler lease program that was supposed to save us tons of money. are people still tracking, what our cost, how our costs have improved?
The
on
cost
those
of
expenses?
it, the costs have improved, but obviously the fuel has gone up. I don't have an analysis on me or to put together currently of that, but it's something that we're looking to put together as a presentation soon.
Okay,
Now, the contractors, take out the fuel increases. The contractors guaranteed a savings, but whether they must have built in some kind of a clause based on possible fuel.
And we also get a revenue source that we did not get before that project in thermal revenue. So, let me get that, I think.
But the project has lived up to its expectations as far as the guarantee from the
Yes.
contractor?
Yes.
is there a report that's produced every year on that from them? Like
Not that I've seen.
an annual,
No, I think it's on our list to put together, it is,
Say, if there's a guarantee in there somewhere, there should be some kind of paperwork on that, but from,
Yeah.
yeah,
We budget about $15,000 of revenue that we expect from thermal revenue. So that's one thing that we did see as a result of that project
that came out, okay,
annually.
yeah. I'm sure most people forgot about that, but it's still in there for some reason, it was.
it was a thing.
It's a big
Yes,
project.
Yes.
Yeah,
It
there was
was.
a big investment in that, and I always wanted to see the return, and,
Yeah.
it's,
Well, other questions?
I was gonna ask about actually the debt service on that boiler project, as you were still doing, $3,000, a little bit plus on that. What is the end date for that?
I might not be able to access that without being on my network, but let me see if I can.
Or if you could just give me
I don't even have it in my head, honestly, but I can look.
Because I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, because it was like my,
2018 maybe?
yes, yeah, it sounds about right. Time flies.
Yeah,
it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
yeah, at least 4.
Throw a pandemic in the middle of it.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
Time lapse.
I couldn't remember if that was like a 10-year plan or a 6-year or whatever it was.
Yeah,
I think they might have refinanced since the one I'm looking at, but this one had 2033 as the ending.
Oh,
So not too
that looks right, though.
close right now.
What else, Gary, Elizabeth, any questions?
The, under other, the interest on the debt service, that's the amortization schedule on a maturing bond. Is that what that is?
Yeah, so every year you see a change in the principal and a decrease in the interest. So it's awkward because they're in two different object codes. So one's in other and then one's in finance transfers. But they end up pretty closely being a wash together annually.
Well, the payment stays the same, but.
Where it
It
gets.
stays very similar, and if this is the right bond schedule, it goes up, and then the last year it drops significantly.
I always like to drill down on just one or two specific line items, okay.
It's dark?
Well, actually, it's kind of between the two. If
Okay.
I remember right, you said, like, snow plowing at Stark, they plow themselves.
They do.
So it goes up a small amount, whatever, just because, okay. You said it's going up. this year,
Yeah,
right?
we're,
It's a supply and
Okay.
fuel for
Okay.
the truck.
The
And
one over here, it seems like every year you budget about 75,000, but I never saw it hit 75,000. 61,000.
well, it really depends on how many snowstorms you have. We've had milder winters in the recent
So we don't want to bring that line item down in the proposed budget from 75 down to a more realistic number?
I would say that the number that we have is a good estimate of what could happen.
Every 10 years?
How did you get to that number? Was it averaged out over the past?
The
I don't think we've.
The snow plowing number?
Yeah.
that stayed the same, and we didn't recalculate anything.
How much
Now,
is
why
it?
wouldn't you, I guess, to Bill's point?
I'm not sure, it's based off of the same estimate that it was that the year that we started it. It's how many snowstorms you have and just making sure we have that amount.
Yeah,
case number?
I don't think it's ever been 75,000. That's why I asked, yeah. And just lastly, this is somewhat more, it jumped out at me. I referee sports. I see at Stark, the athletic refs and officials' budget is going up 16%. We're not getting any.
You're not getting a raise?
No. So, I don't know who's pocketing the cash. No. Oh, you know, it might be. I just thought of that, because I don't think they had a boys lacrosse team last year, so maybe they're thinking, now I'm answering the question for you.
We are, we've had more JV
Okay,
teams.
Okay.
There was a 100-student increase in fall
Participation.
participation. so
okay, that's good. That's a good
It's
thing.
terrific.
Fair enough. And the last thing, at some point during one of those earlier meetings, you said something about food service revenues, and you may have to actually, through taxation, raise money for that, is that?
So the current budgets do not reflect that. We're nervous that may come to fruition because of the ending of the free lunch for students and then the increase in staffing costs.
Okay.
The contractor that we use had to increase wages across the board pretty significantly, and so they're anticipating it being harder to break even.
Okay.
Currently, we do have funds to absorb that in the near term while we continue to analyze what it looks like post federal program. And so I'm continuing that into next year, and if we need it, we would have that conversation again
Okay.
next year.
All right.
What's that? Go ahead.
So the heating repairs, I see that that's listed under the property services, and this is something that I'm kind of just stuck on when it comes to looking at alternative sources to reduce, geothermal and other heating, solar tubes, something that is available in the state to try to reduce the cost of these repairs and such. So is that something that you all have looked at versus kind of just the traditional systems?
That has not been a conversation that we've had or the board has had. Not that it's not a worthwhile conversation, but it has not been one.
I'm just thinking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that's really looking to bring those alternative sources to reduce the cost and reliance on some of these traditional sources, just concentrated risk. So I'm curious, I guess, down the road, because we see this going up 56% for heating repairs, and then when we incorporate that with aging systems over time,
Yep.
that tends to be a little bit more novel to maintain, which in a lot of times increases that cost. And so as a taxpayer, my concern would be, okay, then next year, are we gonna see another 50% increase, perhaps even more, given the novelty of these systems that now become vintage?
So the heating repairs in particular, that's actually a fair amount. It shifted from another line that we were paying for our HVAC service through a different line, and I felt it was more necessary to be in the heating repairs and not in like the general repair line. And so that's, the 56% is a little bit inflated, but that being said, I lost where I was going with that, but we are continuing to look at best ways to be efficient. That solar and those type of items just aren't currently the first in line.
I mean, we did a solar project in Henniker, and that turned out, as far as electricity right now, that has been a benefit. That project happened probably
2020?
20.
Mid-2020?
Yeah, and so, right before COVID, or, right. Maybe
So
right.
mid 2020.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
fairly recently, but that has been a savings. So within the SAU, we have been doing some of that work. We have not heard, that as a community desire,
Yep.
but-
And it was a, in our resource planning committee that is SAU wide, solar has been a topic and it hasn't risen to the top of our priorities.
I'm curious to see where it goes, given the developments through the Department of Energy and the fusion work that's been announced.
I did inquire about that grant, from a trusted, contractor that we have, and they didn't feel as though it was a worthwhile thing to look at this point. Hopefully, I believe there's an annual an annual amount, and so maybe down the road, maybe we would be more likely to be selected for that, but it wasn't something that was recommended for us from that contractor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think any chance to reduce the budget and to
For
save
sure.
money for
Yeah.
taxpayers is gonna be a win-win.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
John Stark have a collective bargaining agreement on the, no?
No,
Okay.
we just had the support staff contract in Weare. After 6 negotiations last year, it was lovely this year.
We stuck to that 2 years, so that they're,
Offset.
Okay, any others?
Could I throw in one final one?
That's okay. We've been waiting.
Yeah, I know.
promise.
I asked you an earlier question, Chris, and you got back to me, how much was returned to the town to offset taxes via the state last year? And it comes to the state and it's a convoluted system, and it goes to the state, and it comes back, and it's.
Yeah, the amount that we use to offset taxes.
It's, you said 952,000 that was just for Weare schools, right?
That sounds
That's the number
correct.
Yes.
that's the number that you.
Yes,
you
yeah.
said. So, that was higher than normal, I think. I think it's been about 500,000. Can you just, was it because of,
We didn't hire people,
okay.
and we needed
So
to.
that's an unusual number probably to expect that.
I mean, right now, we haven't hired some
Right.
folks,
So,
and
that's where I was. The Stark one, you said was 830, but that's in full. You don't know the split offhand between, when it goes to,
I don't know it offhand, I'm sorry.
oh, who would,
I mean, we can get it.
would have
calculate it.
that? Yeah, because that's all I care about.
I have to mess around with
Yeah.
some calculators, but I can usually
Yeah, I
get it
get
to
that,
come
but
out.
it's-
Some of that's Henniker.
yes.
Yeah, well, anything to do with Stark. So partial at 830 is for Henniker, and I only care about what comes back to Weare. 'Cause
I mean,
don't care about-
it's roughly a 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, and that 830 does not include, they also, they retained
They didn't retain anything additional this year. They put
Okay.
away $350,000
And then,
last summer,
so
and
they
this
didn't
summer they
spend
didn't
anything
change
out of
that.
it, so they didn't.
It remained at $350.
Yeah, because they
without
can
any
still,
activity.
they can backfill anything they draw down off of that, and they can
And
backfill it.
no, we didn't do that. And you'll see that, we're required to put a report in the annual report moving forward, and you'll see it was
Okay,
basically a no change year for that. And they decided to they did have the opportunity to raise that to the 5%, and they decided to keep it level for tax rate reasons.
okay, all right, fair enough.
Okay. James, you have a-
Just a quick comment. Again, I'd like to commend you for keeping the proposed budgets for both down to a fairly minimal amount of increase. I would, like Bill, encourage you to sharpen your pencils just a little bit more and perhaps be able to drop those down to a flat line. I'm not going to nitpick you on one line or another. I'm just thinking of the overall tone that we're seeing this year, where everything's being looked at by taxpayers at a minute detail
Yeah.
all across the board, and compared to a decrease, any kind of an increase is still an increase.
Yes.
So, as I said, you guys are doing the work, and you're doing a tremendous job on that. If there's any way that you can sharpen your pencils just a little bit more, I'd like to encourage you to do that.
We aren't going to close the delta, but let me give my pitch for going for our proposed. We did an awful lot of work within cutting supply lines, and if we get our default, those
They revert back.
they revert back. So go with our proposed.
And I agree, because it allows you to move things around and put things differently.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, on the town side, we don't get that option very often. And I would like to have as many budgets passed as possible.
Right, right, and so when we're looking at the Weare budget, without giving raises to all the folks with, not in the collective bargaining agreement, that's really the delta between the default and the proposed. So we can't, I do not foresee sharpening our pencils much there. And then in Stark, we're talking that CRTC tuition, and as.
Which is not defaulted, because it's not
Right.
tied to student need. And so that's, that 212 is a fair amount, that CRTC increase.
So what would happen in that case? Would the students just not be able to go, or
If we got our default at Stark, what would happen? We would have to, the board would have to make some decisions about how to, do we cap the number of students who can go? We could look at, I suppose, do we not run some classes locally if we prioritize and not hire for a position and you do a cut ad? I mean, there are choices you have to make in budgeting, and
Sure.
so that we'd have to make.
so it'd be good to emphasize that to the voters, right? Here's what's gonna happen if
Right.
you don't get it.
Right, right, because that delta's pretty big
Because
between,
as
but it
James-
is
as James
a
just
point
pointed out,
four.
right? You know, everybody wants a low budget, right?
Yes.
But they don't, at the same time, they don't wanna give up the stuff that they give up.
On the town side, they're willing to give it up.
Yeah,
Right.
well, until they complain it's not there.
Well, if it's for someone else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyhow, you gotta make your sales pitch, right?
Well, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate the questions.
The next thing I have on my list here is committee reports. I don't think we need too much of a report from the schools tonight. We're pretty well prepared, unless there's something that you want to add. The Monday board meeting for selectmen, they had several people who were ill, so they didn't really get into any budgeting there. James, how about before that? Is there anything that we didn't have? Because we listened to presentations here just 2 weeks ago,
Yeah, we had,
so I think we're all up to date with the town as well, as far as the budgeting. Because there wasn't anything Monday night. So, I think we're good. We have a few things here. I ran hard copies of the minutes from the last 3 meetings so that people would have them in hand, because that had been a concern. And I know that they've been emailed, but some of my emails, they didn't get through to people because I was doing a group for the first time in my life. Probably that's the reason. But, so I have those which I'll distribute, and then if you want to read through them, we can, or you can bring them back and we can vote on them the next time. We'll have a chance to go through all of the levels, but some of you probably already have, because they have been sent out. And so, this may be a duplication, but let me duplicate anyways, okay? The other thing is, it's a question for Naomi, really, because we have down for January 4th town warrant, but I know you weren't really sure you're going to be able to have it ready by then.
Not without missing Monday.
So I thought maybe we could keep that meeting, but discuss our decisions on the school, because we've got all of that in hand, and we've already we heard the CIP, I know that we won't have the actual warrant articles in hand, but we could spend an hour or so discussing where we stand on CIP projects and where we stand on, and maybe get a head start on that part of our deliberations. And then, you think January 25th would be for the town warrant? Okay. So we'll just switch we'll keep the meetings, 4th and the 25th, but we'll just switch the purpose of the meeting. We'll have discussions, everything we can at that point on the 4th, and then we'll have the town warrant in hand on the 25th. And it's going to get very busy for a couple of weeks. So,
I know 11 January is the public hearing for the school budget, the Weare school budget.
yeah, I didn't have that on here.
Yeah.
I had the deliberative sessions, but I didn't have those, but maybe,
Not that anything will change in the budget at that point. That's just a presentation of so that you have the slides and all that. Yeah.
and those are all on your websites.
11th, I think the other one's the 13th?
Tuesday.
13th.
Tuesday.
Stark is the 13th. So Friday the 13th. Yeah.
Last time we had a Friday,
Okay, here's October minutes.
This is the whole thing?
No, those are separate, those are mine.
Oh, this is that.
Mine are very
First
short.
meeting.
That's first, we, that's just our organizational meeting,
Got
then.
an extra one here. Oh, I'll give one to Janice. I'm collecting for Janice.
And that's for November meeting. And one for Janice. You said you're collecting for her?
Please, yeah.
An extra one over here. It's an extra.
And this was the December 7th meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
A different color. Blue. Thank you to Beth Rouse, who ran these off for me today, or together.
Well, next time.
So you want to hold on these and let's go through the three the next time and have a motion to approve them or to make any changes you recommend, and then we can get them posted beyond our own. The other thing, anybody else have any other business for tonight? If not, I think we did a pretty good job with all the school presentations, and we're out of here in what, a little over an hour and a half? So thank you.
Not bad, huh?
Not bad.
We can ask her to step up, we can fight some more.
Oh, the meetings will get a bit longer as we get closer to the deliberative session. And as we start doing all of those blurbs.
You're looking at me.
Well, you're always so good at them.
Primer.
I think what works best with those is to have somebody come in with a draft rather than trying to invent them all when we sit around as a group of 9.
I think what, yeah, well, I think what we did, I think you have to kind of talk about it and kind of get the consensus in a
Yeah.
group. And I think what we did other years is that I try to, at least when I've done it, I've tried to take that stuff and then put it in a draft and then send it out to everybody.
Right.
So that the next time you come in, then you can say, then you got something to work off of.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way we've done it. The thing I have to make sure I get everybody's email address correct on the new board, because I'm not sure I have it all right now.
No, I think it's a good idea, we just give all the work to Bill, and then he
Yeah,
can.
right. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind doing it again,
When I
but,
send out the minutes, everybody's email is on there, so you
Yeah.
can use that as a
Okay.
template.
all right, all right.
Forward from that email if you want.
Okay,
and it's
that's good. Oh,
everybody's-
yeah, that's good, that's good. Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Yeah, that's what I use a lot of the ones
Yep.
that you had in
Right.
order
Yep.
to fill out my list.
Or just send it to Tom and he can broadcast
I
it.
can watch it.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that,
Yeah.
whatever works.
No, not that stupid, just, well, partially. Anything
Do we need a
else?
motion to adjourn?
We
Pardon me?
do.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We don't really, I can just declare it as the chairman. We'll have a motion. Elizabeth, you'd like to make the motion to adjourn?
Motion so moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Anyone opposed?
There is much rejoicing.
Yay.
Good to see you.
It's good to be seen. Thank you, everyone.